저희 동생 하나가 여준삼 동생이 있고 그리고 딸 장녀 큰딸인데 여경화 4살 때 헤어졌습니다. 그러니까 지금 현재 다 60을 지나서 70들 바라보고 다 그래요. 그들이 아직 살아있으면 소식이라도 알 수 있고 만날 수 있는 이러한 기회가 되었으면 대단히 감사하겠습니다.
이거 똑같은 거가. 얘 밑이 동생이고 얘가 막내 동생이고. 정말 많이 불렀어, 순선아. 내가 너를 참 많이 불렀다. 너를 내가 크면서 너를 굉장히 미워했어. 그럼 너 나한테 매도 맞았고 이렇게 희어서 살 줄 모르고 내가 걔한테 그 모시게 하는 게 엄청 그냥 사죄하고 싶어서 정말 사죄하고 싶었는데 만나지도 못하고 죽게 됐는데 이거 이렇게 한번 좀 갈 수 있었으면 정말 좋겠네. 순선아 정말 보고 싶다. 못하겠어.
이산가족 신청서는 1988년부터 계속 접수를 받기 시작해서 현재 12만 8천 명이 접수를 했습니다.
3 decades of separation, 3 days of reunions. In September 1985, the entire world watched in tears as the first family reunion between the two Koreas since the Korean War was held. Shouts of joy and tearful cries filled the reunion venue as 50 family members, some in wheelchairs, some assisted by relatives, hugged, kissed, and cried for the years lost for the far too short reunion. And that's where things would stand for the next 15 years. The fate of families swayed by politics, ideology, the regime.
정부하고 또 북한 적십자뿐만 아니라 ICRC나 IFRC를 통해서도 할 수 있도록 다각적으로 연구를 하면서 움직여야 하지 않을까 이제 이런 생각이 듭니다.
So many attempts have been made by the two Koreas to resolve the issue of separated families on the Korean peninsula in the last 6 decades since the armistice and the separation, without bearing much fruitful results. And now, there is a growing consensus in the global community that there needs to be action on an international level to resolve this human issue of the Korean War. To speak of Geneva as a city of peace is almost self-evident. So intense are the links between the city, its history and culture, and its universal vocation. In its role as host city to 32 international organizations, the UN and over 250 non-governmental agencies, it is known as International Geneva. The UN system in Geneva includes a large number of intergovernmental organizations, many of which have key functions in human rights and humanitarian pursuits. And nestled in the historic Palais Wilson, the former headquarters of the League of Nations in the 1920s, is the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights.
And there's been a lot of focus and encouragement from different member states on this issue. I think it's seen as a really sad and tragic legacy of a frozen conflict situation. It's really the human face of the division on the Korean Peninsula. And now as these families grow older, as people age, as a new generation comes up, it just seems so important to try to, bring some kind of resolution to this, some renewed contact, renewed momentum, renewed communication.
The situation that has divided the two Koreas, and then the closure of North Korea and the extreme human rights violations that take place there, have created an effect on families on both sides, which is unprecedented. I mean, we don't see a situation similar to this in many other parts of the world. I think it's such a dramatic situation affecting so many thousands of individuals.
For the past 6 decades and as recent as this month, the desperate desires of these families to find and meet their relatives one last time were used as bargaining chip for political and economic interests. And this time again, it raised the last strand of hope for the small group of elderly Koreans with family in the north. New registration forms flowed in those few hours at the Korean Red Cross. Then, in a matter of hours, it was back to square one. The problems posed by these divided families is a pressing human rights issue that's been used for political ends by the governments on both sides of the 38th parallel over the last 6 decades.
특수한 그런 남북 간의 관계를 갖고 있고 그동안에 수차례 회담을 통해서 이 문제를 풀려고 했습니다만 좀 안 됐던 부분이 있기 때문에 이 문제를 바라보는 시각 차이 그런 것들 때문에 70년대부터 이산가족 문제를 풀기 위한 회담이 지속적으로 이루어졌습니다만은 큰 성과를 내지를 못했던 부분이죠.
The division of the Korean Peninsula is one of the last remaining relics of the Cold War. World War II divided Korea into a communist northern half and an American-occupied southern half divided at the 38th parallel. The Korean War began when the North Korean Communist Army equipped with Soviet tanks invaded non-communist South Korea. The US quickly came to South Korea's aid. The records and documents of the Korean War at the United Nations Library in Geneva are evidence of the destructive conflict on the Korean Peninsula more than 60 years ago. After 3 years of a bloody and frustrating war, the US, representing the United Nations Command, North Korea, and the People's Republic of China signed an armistice agreement. Signed on July 27, 1953, it was to ensure a complete cessation of hostilities until a final peaceful settlement could be achieved. No final peaceful settlement has come, but it has left behind millions of Korean families separated by the most heavily armed border on Earth. The International Committee of the Red Cross. The ICRC is an independent body with a mission to protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict. But its lead role also includes helping people that have been separated from their families or living without news of them because of armed conflicts. Consequently, the ICRC was present on the Korean Peninsula during the 1950 to 1953 war, to provide assistance and expertise in tracing families dispersed and dislocated all across the Korean Peninsula. And there have been calls recently that the global community must once again step in to resolve the separated family problem here in Korea. Presence during the Korean War, so the 7th of August, 1951, and it's a report of visit to a prison in Daegu. In fact, the international community has begun taking note of the issue. In March this year, the UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution to establish a COI to look into North Korea's human rights record, which will also specifically investigate the plight of the tens of thousands of families separated by the Korean conflict.
So I think the Commission of Inquiry will be very attentive to these important human issues. Of course, this much broader category of people who are just separated by the events of history and really now need to find new channels to know each other's fate and to resume that most important human right, human contact with the people that we love.
Other United Nations agencies are also increasingly taking note of the importance of the family unit and the need to keep the family together in times of crisis. They're promoting in various ways the significance of staying with family in the face of catastrophe. Leo Dobbs is the English editor for the United Nations Refugee Agency. He is working on a story of a U.S.-based South Sudanese refugee and an Olympic athlete whose reunion with his mother and father was made possible by the UNHCR.
He fled home, I don't know, about 20 years ago, and he went because of the civil war that was going on. But he wanted to go back home, and after the Olympics, and so we helped him go back home. His mother was the one who sent him away from their home area because it was too dangerous, and then the whole village turned out. His father was still alive, and he danced and sang, and by all accounts, it was a fantastic reunion.
The story of Gore is only one of the many family tracing and reunion cases the UNHCR makes happen as part of their program dealing with family reunification. Not only that, the United Nations Refugee Agency's campaign this year highlights the impact of war on families.
When families are torn apart by war, it really destroys the entire society, the fabric of society. So we've established different elements, materials, and elements to support it, and it's a global campaign. And the main message is even one family torn apart by war is too many.
This is one of the oldest harbors in Korea. Located on the northeastern coast, Jumunjin Harbor, which opens widely into the East Sea, is home to nearly 400 fishing vessels and still serves as a base for the fishing industry here. But this harbor is more than that for the millions of Koreans who fled back and forth between the war in Korea more than 60 years ago. It's a reminder of an artificial yet all too real division of the Korean peninsula. The Jumunjin Fish Market is one of the largest seafood markets in the nation. On any ordinary day, you'll find all the hustle and bustle of a fish market here, from fresh fish, crabs, and shellfish catching the eyes of locals and tourists alike. It looks like any other seafood market along the coast at first glance, but once you focus in on the people, you'll find out that their epic tales remind us of Korea's all too painful history. More than 60 years ago, at the height of the Korean War, tens of thousands of Koreans in the northern part of the peninsula arrived here along the eastern coast, some in handmade wooden boats and some on the U.S. military's landing ship tanks and vessels with only the possessions they could carry. Here, just south of the current DMZ, refugees from Hamgyong province to the north found a spot of land to settle on temporarily. They call the area Gode, which means summit or hilltop in their hometown Hamgyong dialect. 79-year-old Kim Young-soo is one of them who, after 3 years of bloodshed, got stuck and stayed here only about an hour's drive from the Korean border because they wanted to be the first ones back home as soon as the border opened up. It's now been more than 60 years.
거기서 내가 16살에 피난 나왔어. 근데 여기는 79이야. 여기는 60년. 이 우에만은 한 100세대가 살았다고 봐. 이 우에만 이게 한
꼬디만.
그렇지. 그냥 그분들 전부 다 그 할아버지 전부 다 세상 떠났어.
Squeezed between the sea and a harbor, they built makeshift homes on impossibly small plots of land, waiting for the war to settle so that they could return to their hometowns up north.
불력이야 불력이. 수협적인데 그때만 해도 그렇게 하니까 전쟁에서 언제 끝날지 그러니까 끝나면 빨리 이제 고향 먼저 선착순으로 간다고. 그때만 전부 다 이 할아버지들이 빨리 고향 갈 생각만 했지. 그때 나온 할아버지는 오래 못 살고 일찍 죽었어. 술 먹는 할아버지들은 고향은 안 되고 가니까 술만 잡수고 아무도 안 없고 그래가지고 일찍 돌아갔었어.
He tells us that the old men called abai, which in Hamgyong dialect means abaji or father, including himself, never intended to leave their homes for good. But the fighting raged on for 3 years, and without a peace treaty that would have allowed them to go home, they settled down in the south to a life as fishermen, for a time doing well catching Alaska pollock or building fishing boats.
가보고 싶은 마음이 있어. 거기 우리 친구가 하나 살아 있어. 그 사람 내 동창이 살아 있는데 그 사람이 혹시 만날 수 이북에서 이따 살았다는 거는 그 기적이 아니나 그 뭐 사는 데서 의술도 없는 데서 한번 가보고 싶기도 하고.
Most of the men in this refugee town have died over the years, and it's mostly old women or amais that make up the small population here. Having remained by the sea, waiting for the day when they can hop on a boat and return home, most of them still work on squid boats or the fish market down the hill. But on rainy days like these, the dozen or so residents of Gode get together at this small community center.
몇 년 된 거죠?
19살 나왔어 모르겠던 몇 년. 전 귀시 다 되는데 무슨 귀신 여기 귀신인데 우리 갈 때는 여기 나올 때는 석 달 만에 간다 그랬던 거지.
내가 11살 나왔는데 나는 기억 다 알아. 이 시계고 뭐 다 걸어놓고 그냥 나왔어. 그냥 이렇게 오래가 있을 줄은 생각 안 했어. 나가면 한 5일이나 한 3일 있다가 고향에 돌아갈 줄 알았지. 이렇게 와서 오래 있을 생각도 안 하고 막상에 나와보니 이렇게 오래 있었는데 참 여기 나와서 고생도 많이 했어. 여기도 많이 배웠고.
Away from family, away from home, the people of Gode lent each other their shoulders, counted on one another in times of crisis. For the last 60-some years, for more than half a century. They sing, they laugh, they drown their bruised hearts in a glass of liquor.
야야야 내 나이가 어때서 사랑의 나이가 있나요 어느 날 우연히 겨울 앞에 비춰진 내 모습을 바라보면서 눈물이 나네.
But underneath the smiles are young hearts drenched in sorrow. The entire village is like a big family, says Abai Kim. Having lived side by side for more than 60 years, having endured what no one else on earth has had to experience, they had no one but each other for most of their lives here in the south.
남아있어? 남아있어? 예, 있구만. 거기 있어.
Ham Jae-chun and Kim Chun-bok left North Korea with nothing but their 1-year-old baby wrapped around the wife's back. The rest of Ham's family stayed behind. His parents told the newlyweds back then to go stay in the south for a few days until the storm passed. It wouldn't even be a week or a month, just a few days. That became 63 years.
너다지 술만 잡수고 막 미친 것처럼 이러다가 늙었지 뭐. 그전에는 살아서 어떻게 서로 얼굴이라도 보고 죽었으면 좋겠다 이랬지만 어제는 그런 기대도 없고 걷지도 못하는 게 뭐.
Now both in their 80s and too ill to move freely, the aged couple lose hope with each passing day.
우리들 어제는 할아버지도 거기 또 남동생도 있고 삼촌도 있고 사촌도 있는데 이제는 어디서 오래 만나야 못 만나잖아. 어제는
이런 식으로 태어났어. 8.15 해방 좋고 또 6.25 좋고.
Even if they were allowed to go back home today, they wouldn't be able to. The 89-year-old Abai may have forgotten many things, but there is one thing that never slips his mind.
고향 가고 싶는 거 하잖아. 말도 못해 이제는.
그저 보고 싶은 게지 그저. 여전 해진디 오래되니까 자꾸 그저 눈이 아물거릴 때가 많지요. 감도 제가 타다라는데 눈이 개네 가만히도 니 못해.
얼마나 잘났다. 아이고, 잘못은
Poignant longing for family, wistful yearning to return home. His wish of a lifetime may be closer now to coming true.
The Brandenburg Gate in the heart of Berlin today is a symbol of unity for the German people. But for nearly 3 decades, up until the German reunification, it symbolized the division of Berlin, as with the erection of the Berlin Wall in 1961, it overnight found itself in the no man's land between East and West Germany. Now it is here that we begin our journey to explore the German experience in reuniting families and loved ones across the Berlin Mauer.
More than 2 decades have passed since the fall of one of the last remaining remnants of the Cold War era, but bits and pieces of the wall still stand in different parts of the German capital. For tourists, it's a must-see travel spot. For new Berliners, it's a part of history. For those who lived through it, it's a reminder of an abrupt and sudden division that changed their lives. Along the Bernaustrasse, the location of one of the longer preserved sections of the Berlin Wall, we met Reinhard Hummel, a former West Berliner who still vividly remembers the day 52 years ago when he overnight found himself separated by a grand barrier with the love of his life. Reinhard says he was, however, able to go see her from time to time.
Bin ich immer mal wieder, jeden Monat oder so, nach Ostberlin gefahren mit einem Tagesvisum.
On August 13, 1961, the communist government of the German Democratic Republic began to build a barbed-wired concrete wall between East and West Berlin. And Reinhard's one-day visits to the eastern side of the wall were only made possible after then-Chancellor Willy Brandt's new Eastern policy, changed through rapprochement and policy of small steps.
Wir alle haben lange genug auf diese Nachricht warten müssen. Von Donnerstag 13 Uhr an können die Westberliner die Passierscheine abholen. Ab Donnerstagnachmittag konnten also die ersten mit solchen Scheinen hinübergehen.
For Brandt, they were small steps. For the hundreds of thousands who were now allowed to visit their loved ones after years of separation, these were highly significant small steps.
They all agreed that it was extremely necessary to improve the human conditions in the divided country, and that's what was the main political aim of the new government of the Federal Republic, which was in action from 1969 until 1982.
Die Ostpolitik von Willy Brandt hat dazu geführt, dass gewisse Erleichterungen waren für uns Westberliner und auch für diejenigen, die aus der DDR geflohen waren. Durch diese Politik alles möglich geworden.
Michael Jakob was an East German living in East Berlin when he tried to escape to the West along with a few friends who had family in West Berlin. They were caught and sent to prison by the East German authorities. However, he says his friends with families in the West were freikauft, or freed to the West shortly afterwards on ransom paid by the West German government.
Die meisten sind nach der Hälfte der Haftzeit abgeschoben worden. Der offizielle Grund dafür ist Familienzusammenführung. Das war der offizielle Begriff der DDR, die gesetzliche Grundlage.
Michael, with no familial ties in the West, had to serve all 3 years and 8 months of prison term and still remain in East Germany. His parents were very much involved in politics in the East. Michael, unlike his comrades, had no grounds to be freed to the West.
Und er war ein Offizier. Gut. In meinem speziellen Fall war es so, dass durch die lange Haftzeit und meinen weiteren DDR-Aufenthalt der Intervention von westdeutscher Seite nur die Möglichkeit war, aus rein humanitären Gründen übersiedeln zu dürfen.
So this was our main aim, and in order to mention what was going on too in the divided Germany. And the result was the unification very quickly in 1990.
Having endured one of the greatest wars in history and the division of a country, the German Red Cross has special expertise in tracing family and reuniting loved ones.
The German Red Cross Tracing Service was found in 1945, right after the war ended. At that time, every fourth German was either searching for his loved ones or being searched for.
The German Red Cross's family tracing service dates back to the end of World War II and continues to help reunite loved ones separated by the war and the division of Germany afterwards. Its family tracing service was at the peak of its activity from 1961 to 1989 during the divided Germany. Iris shares with our team one of their most rewarding stories.
So these are actually some of the cases we dealt with and we talked about before.
This is a case of a baby named Gracia whose parents just happened to end up on the other side of the wall on August 13, 1961. The German Red Cross worked on behalf of the parents who were desperate to bring their baby to the West, and after 8 years of hard work, Gracia was passed on to her parents' arms.
It took years to overcome this separation, and the German Red Cross Tracing Service was very engaged. This is the stamp saying that this case came to a successful ending, that Gracia was able to move to the West, expressing her urgent...
And even today, the Family Tracing Service is one of the German Red Cross's most honored and prioritized programs.
It's different cases. So this is importance, for example, of restoring family links, because of course the German Red Cross of the German Democratic Republic had the obligations from the international context as well. So they were just limited through the political realities in the country.
At a small but well-kept summer house in the northwestern part of Berlin, we met the Magdefrau sisters. At first glance, they seem like ordinary women, but they have an extraordinary story to tell. Rosemary Magdefrau was forcibly separated from her sister and her family and spent a third of her life alone on the other side of the wall that divided them. When the wall went up in 1961, Rosemary was a student at a university in the eastern part of Berlin.
Und haben also versucht, so häufig wie möglich uns zu sehen. So häufig wie möglich. Alle Möglichkeiten, die uns gegeben waren, die wir nutzen konnten, haben wir genutzt, um uns zu sehen.
Ich war also 25 Jahre von meiner Familie getrennt. Wir haben alle Mittel und Wege ausgenutzt, um unsere Verbindung zu halten. Und dann bin ich ausgereist 1985 im Dezember und den Antrag hatte ich im Januar 1985 gestellt. Ja, und dann waren wir wieder zusammen.
Ever since the younger of the two sisters moved back to the West, the two have been inseparable. Now they try to make the best of each other's company, enjoying the last years of their lives, making up for the years they lost.
Gut, ne? Wir trinken zusammen Kaffee, wir zanken uns natürlich auch manchmal, aber ganz selten eigentlich, ne? Oder?
Also es ist so,
wir gehen zusammen schwimmen.
Einer der, die einem gegeben sind von der Natur aus, die man gar nicht erringen muss, großartig, sind die Geschwister. Die hat man eben von den Eltern geschenkt gekriegt. Und das sollte man, solange man kann, genießen.
This is different in Korea. Sorry, but this is one of the results of the Civil War, yes.
Seoul, South Korea. At the heart of one of the most densely populated cities in the world stands the Korean Red Cross. First established in 1905, its programs and services are guided by the movement's fundamental principles like every other Red Cross and Crescent societies across the world. What's especially unique, however, is that as one of the two national societies operating in the Korean Peninsula, the Korean Red Cross has mandated programs solely dedicated to resolving humanitarian challenges that span the 38th parallel. One of them is restoring family links between the families who inadvertently became separated during and after the Korean War. A key part of this is organizing inter-Korean family reunions in partnership with the North Korean Red Cross that allows such individuals to meet their loved ones face to face, most of them probably for their last time. As of the end of June this year, nearly 56,000 out of the more than 128,800 applicants have passed away. Only 72,800, or 56.6%, remained alive. And the clock is ticking for the small group of survivors as well, as 4 out of 5 applicants are now 70 years or older. Those in their 80s make up the largest proportion with 40.5%, and applicants in their 90s also make up a significant 9.3%.
북한이 원하는 게 있을 겁니다. 북한이 체제에 대한 어떤 불안정성 때문에 이산가족 이상봉 문제를 끓인다든지 여러 가지 행정적인 그런 그 절차가 복잡하고 품이 많이 들어간다는 그런 이야기를 했었거든요. 그러면 우리가 좀 더 적극적으로 인센티브를 제공한다든지 정말 니네들이 원하는 게 뭔지를 보고 접근을 하면 가능성이 있죠. 뭐 동서독이 프라이 카프를 통해서 정치범들을 빼냈다는 것, 뭐 그런 사례와 같이 이산가족 문제가 시급한 문제고 반드시 단시일 내에 획기적으로 풀어야 한다고 하면 그러한 그 의지를 가지고 북측과 협의할 필요가 있는 거죠. 그렇게 되면 아마 뭔가 풀 수 있는 단초가 있을 거라고 봅니다.
At a small apartment in southwestern Seoul, we met Kim Song-sun, one of the millions of Koreans who came down to the south more than 60 years ago. She was a young nurse in her early 20s who obeyed her mother to go stay in the south for a few weeks to avoid being taken by the Communist Army. She came all alone, not knowing she'd stay for this long. Aboard a wooden boat from the coast of Hamgyong province in North Korea, she came to the southeast coast less than an hour's drive from home.
주문진 배에 내렸어. 그리고 거기서부터는 이제 피난도 부산까지 가야 되는데 도중에 근데 아는 아저씨가 아무도 없는데 부산 가서 뭐 하겠냐, 여기 있다가 도로 이복을 들어가자 그러더라고. 아이고 그럼 나야 고맙지요 그러고. 다른 동생보다 바로 밑에 동생 걔 생각만 그렇게 하고 걔 이름만 부르면 그냥 그렇게 울고 참 많이 울었네.
Then she shares with us a handwritten letter from her little sister in North Korea.
이게 용교, 이건 우리 동생의 아들한테서 온 거고. 나간다고 나간 언니가 영원히 돌아올 수 없는 사람이 되었다고 아버지, 어머니, 우리 동생들의 눈물과 근심 속에 하루하루를 보낸 세월이 어제만 같은데 벌써 61년 세월이 흘렀습니다. 그저 기쁘고 반갑고 너무 뜻밖의 소식 앞에 언니 앞에서 우리 부리는 응석이라고 생각하십시오. 이 친구가 그거를 도와서 해주니까 편지도 보내주고 물건도 보내주고 이렇게 해가지고 내가 하지. 난 내 힘으로는 못해.
그 유울이라고 동생이 있는데 걔가 그 친구가 나하고 중학교 동창생이거든. 그래서 내가 일본에 살면서 일본에서 이북에다가 내 동생들한테 연락을 해가지고 다 찾은 거야. 그 임누님 동생 다 찾은 거야. 그 동창생이니까. 그래서 그 다음부터 계속해서 일본으로 편지 오는 거지.
However, she's one of the lucky few who do know the fate of her loved ones on the other side of the border, as there is no civilian mail or phone connections across the closely guarded inter-Korean border.
이렇게 희어서 살 줄 모르고 내가 걔한테 그 모시게 하는 게 엄청 그냥 사죄하고 싶어서 정말 사죄하고 싶었는데 만나지도 못하고 죽게 된다. 이거 이렇게 한번 좀 갈 수 있었으면 정말 좋겠네. 내 마음을 이렇게 털어놓고 동생한테 보고 싶다라기보다 사죄하는 마음이니까.
On one rainy evening in downtown Seoul, we were able to meet Kim Kyung-jae again. This cramped and tiny office in a rundown building in the South Korean capital is where the 82-year-old and a small circle of friends from back home in the north get together to help those in similar situations. Kim tells us it was utter desperation to find his family in the north and send them whatever he could that's driven him to play the role of an inter-Korean postman for the last 30 years, to reconnect split families by the heavily fortified border.
이 안에 뭐 폐결약도 있고 뭐 몰라 뭐 나 좋은 책상 위에도 있고 저거는 뭐 방광염? 방광염 전부 한글로 써놨잖아.
Kim himself left the North in 1950, the first year of the Korean War, with all of his brothers. But he had to leave his youngest sister behind to stay with his parents. He was 19 years old, she was only 8.
나는 내 동생한테 물건 보내길래 내가 일본 가서 직접 방을 얻어놓고 7년 동안 살았어. 근데 내가 늘 마음속에는 뭐 있느냐 그러면 아버지 어머니 돌아갔을 땐 지 혼자서 그 슬픔을 감당했을 거 아니야. 그게 혼자서 얼마나 울었을까. 그게 늘 마음속에 와서 아파 나는. 그러니까 네가 눈물을 흘렸던 거를 내가 살아있는 동안 보상해 주마. 그 마음이 나는 가득해 지금도.
2 to 3 hours into the meeting, Kim slowly gets up and brings us a package. A package full of letters, postal package tracing papers, and even fax sheets.
이게 내 60년이 안에 담겨 있어. 이게 내가 이북에서 제일 처음에 연락을 하던 편지야. 이게 지금 1992년이야. 1992년 12월 6일 날.
Letters are postmarked Democratic People's Republic of Korea in pale ink. The imprints with North Korea's official name testify to Kim Kyung-ji's success in reconnecting some of the tens of thousands of family members separated for decades by the world's last Cold War frontier.
제일 처음에 흥분돼가지고 편지를 읽지 못하더라고. 떨려서 읽지 못하겠대. 그가 상률이란 친구가 어머니 사진 딱 보더만 그러니까 내가 이북에 있는 우리 어머니 사진 받았습니다. 내 동생들이 편지 받았습니다. 그러니까 또 밥 먹던 사람들 박수 박자짝 치대. 근데 그런데 벌떡 일어나더니 그 식당에서 벌떡 일어나더니 내한테 큰절을 하는 거야.
Kim says he continues to help others find families in the North because he's been in their shoes before, not knowing the fate of your loved ones. He understands how they feel.
돈도 좀 보내줘야 되잖아. 그 연락만 받으면 되나? 내가 제일 처음에 동생을 찾을 때 마음 같겠지. 지금 현재 그 사람들도 그걸 오래 지속하느냐 안 하느냐 하는 건 그 사람들이 나름대로 행동이고 제일 처음엔 자꾸 찾아달라 그래. 그 우리 동생 좀 찾아봐달라. 무슨 우리 누님 좀 찾아봐달라.
The 82-year-old Kim says this is why he'll continue to help other families reunite by sending as many letters and packages to the North as he can until his dying day.
내 소? I have not. 아무것도 없어.
His only wish he gave up on years ago. Back in Geneva, we wanted to find out if there were other global means to address the issue of Korea's separated families.
Well, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights really puts fundamental importance on the family as a basic unit of society and the protection of the family by the state. You know, that has a very important dimension in terms of the integrity of the family, the unity of the family, the ability of family members to remain in contact, to communicate with each other, to be reunited.
The headquarters of the International Committee of the Red Cross has in storage hundreds of millions of data, some of it dating back to World War I, as evidence of the ICRC's lead role in reuniting families in times of conflict. The ICRC and National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies work together around the world to locate people and put them back into contact with their relatives. It includes looking for family members, restoring contact, reuniting families, and seeking to clarify the fate of those who remain missing.
So these are different images from all around the world of our Family Links work. This one is from Kyrgyzstan, for example. It shows a family writing to their relative in prison. And this is something we do, the ICRC, across the world in about 80 countries. Here you've got some of the traditional ways that we link families with their missing relatives. For example, here you've got a letter. It talks about the fact that the family is in good health, that there's just been the birth of a new child. So you can see here the traditional ways, written messages that we've been transferring between missing family members for the last 100 years or so. Over here, you've got some of the new ways that we've been able to link family members because of the advance in technology. So you've got different images. This one here is in Afghanistan, people communicating to their relatives in detention in Bagram detention facility. Here in Sri Lanka, and again over here in Iraq, you've got people making calls by satellite telephone to family members elsewhere. So with the change of technology, things have changed in the way we work as well, and now we connect people by phone or by video link up.
So, how important are family reunions for the ICRC?
It's an absolutely essential part of our work. It's something we've been doing for over 100 years now, and the ICRC works in those moments of crisis to try to reconnect family members. It's an absolute humanitarian need for families to be in touch with each other, to at least be able to speak to each other or write to each other, to be able to meet each other. So that there's a clear humanitarian need.
The Fourth Geneva Convention, adopted in 1949, defines protections for civilians in times of war. And that convention, which was later passed into the body of customary international law by the UN Security Council, specifically points to the protection of family links. Article 25 of the Fourth Geneva Convention states that all persons shall be enabled to give news of their families and to receive news from them. And Article 26 underlines that each party to conflict shall facilitate inquiries by families dispersed during the conflict.
북한도 그렇다고 국제 인권 레짐에 전혀 무반응한 게 아니고 몇 년 전에 자신의 헌법에 인권이라는 문구도 넣고 관련되는 국내 형법 같은 것도 계속 국제사회의 지적에 맞춰서 개정을 하고 있고 충분하진 않지만은 아주 점진적으로 아주 조금씩 변화의 조짐도 있습니다. 국제인권법적인 접근은 이산가족 문제에 있어서 상당히 중요한 그런 어프로치고 접근이고 그런 점에서 일단 꾸준히 그쪽 방향으로 일단은 방향을 잡고 주장할 필요가 있을 것 같습니다.
And with a mandate from the Geneva Conventions, the International Committee of the Red Cross intervened as a neutral intermediary between the Red Cross societies of the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China back in the 1980s in arranging family reunions, the first in more than 30 years.
Well, the ICRC at that time played the role of intermediary between Beijing and Taipei. We started to work in 1980, and during that time there were no direct contact between the national societies of the Red Cross in Taipei and in Beijing. We were receiving requests from the national societies of families who have been separated, and we transmitted this information on the other side. About 25,000 families have been able to be in touch again.
In fact, the ICRC had its presence during the Korean War from 1950 to 53 to play an impartial and neutral intermediary role in finding family members and loved ones dispersed during the chaos.
Mother, the father.
Theory, however, explains that the ICRC has not been involved in the tracing family process on the Korean Peninsula since the end of the war.
Unfortunately, the ICRC is not directly active in these situations. Since the end of the war, we remain at the disposal of the authorities on both sides. If they need the ICRC to play a role of neutral intermediary, that can be one aspect, or maybe to play also a role of advisory, as we have quite a lot of experience when it comes to family reunification, when it comes to just exchange of news between border. So for this we stand ready, but it's up to the authorities to decide to call upon the ICRC to play this role.
Governments have obligations towards their citizens. The South Korean government has obligations towards its citizens, and the North Korean government has obligations towards their citizens. As long as we don't address this as a human rights issue, and we keep on thinking that this is a political issue, I don't think the solution is going to come. And the UN can do a lot to prove that this is a human rights issue and to document that.
Korean Assembly for Reunion of 10 Million Separated Families, or KARTS, is an NGO of those separated families living in the South, dedicated to the mission of working on ways to bring the problems of the separated Korean families to resolution through global means. In 2011, KARTS gained the special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Having earned the status, KARTS has been raising the issue of Korea's separated families on the UN stage, inviting more discussions on an international level.
And we are trying to work with the Council as well as the UN Human Rights Council as well as the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights based in Geneva, to the fact that the international community within the framework of the United Nations pick up the issue of separated families as one of the UN's thematic mandates.
This issue has become very much hostage to the political issues, the security issues, the ups and downs of relations between the North and South. I think there's a need for a real paradigm shift. The important thing is getting the issue out from underneath this heavy political bind and treating it properly as a human issue, as a humanitarian issue, but above all as a human rights issue.
Various international human rights conventions and declarations grant broad protection of family life, leading many jurists to maintain that family rights, including family unity, must be protected. And those here at international organizations say the ongoing sufferings of the tens of thousands of separated families on the Korean Peninsula by the Korean War must be addressed by the global community, as it is more of a human rights issue than anything else.